So we're really going to get into design real soon. We're done with our sitemap. We're done with user flows. We're done a lot of sketching, and we have a good understanding of the content and the structure that is going into our app. And now I think wireframe is pretty much the next step. But the big question is, well, what is a wireframe? Now, you may have seen images like this when we were sketching, and wireframe is a low fidelity layout that serves three simple purposes. It presents the information that will be displayed on the page in a little bit more detail than the sketches and our user flows. It gives an outline of structure and layout of the page, conveys the overall direction and description of your user interface. It's basically, as you can see here, it's like a blueprint of a building, but instead of a building, it describes the details clearly and specifically while giving everyone involved a good idea of the product. It's kind of like the middle ground between your sketches and higher fidelity designs and prototypes. It helps you really plan layout interaction patterns for your user without worrying about distracting details like colors or copy or typography. All these things can really bog down your design process. Another thing to really know is that they're really heavily influenced from your prior work. So if you've done story mapping, you have user stories, you have done things like user flows or site maps. All these different artifacts should really influence the way you create your wireframes. So just keep that in mind, that you shouldn't just be like jumping in and creating a whole bunch of wireframes and not necessarily really understanding the type of content that needs to be there. And so really consult all these artifacts that you have if you don't have them. Talk to the right people that you can get you the information, whether are the product manager or internal stakeholders. Use your voice if you need to ask them. So why do we use them? Two big reasons. I like using them because they really help to test your concepts and your structure. So they really help you to understand how user will navigate your product. Sometimes you can use your wireframes to highlight certain areas that you think need to have components on a page, or to test if that piece of content is actually working and if the user flow makes sense. So this is one of the big reasons I use that, so that it could be like user flows again, but in much more details. Understanding the different types of interaction and putting it into wireframe make it a little bit more easier and test with user to get, better results. The next best thing, actually, I think this is the number one thing actually you need to use them. They are fast, cheap, and impermanent. Don't get attached to wireframes. They meant to change. As you gather more information through research and feedback from your clients and from your users, they are a great place to fail. And I don't mean that negatively. On the project, you want to fail as quick as possible. And that means you want to test your assumptions as quick as possible, before it gets to high fidelity design or even more development. They serve as a common language for your team as well. They are complex enough to inform everyone and simple enough to not get bogged down by too much details. Now, the little kind of graph I have here is the build, measure, learn graph. So what that essentially means is you build what could be a wireframe, it could be a sketch. You measure it against something. What metrics you're testing against? It could be like, I want to know if this interaction works. I want to know if the user actually are interested in my product. You learn from those results and then you build again. So wireframes really help you to kind of implement that build, measure, learn cycle. So I want you always to think about that. Whenever you're kind of testing with the user or just talking to other clients or stakeholders, you keep that in the back of your mind because the design process isn't linear. So how can we use them? They're useful for 3 big reasons right now. They help your team estimate the type of work they're going to complete clearly and common understanding across the team. They help you learn understanding what is going on. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. It gives them an opportunity to chime in as well. If you presenting to them, you should always be presenting to them, even if it's talking to your peers really quickly. The specs are kind of dated, and wireframe can be really much more collaborative than that. So get your team involved as much as possible. The next thing is user testing. We use them a lot for user testing. The sooner you test it, the better. And that's the big thing. Like I said before, fail fast. So you can get quick feedback without necessarily develop complex prototypes with all these different types of visual things like typography, color, and all the different types of details like that. So testing with users really uncover like the different types of pain points. And so this is a little customer journal map. If you create one at this point, that's great as well, because it really help you understand how the user moves through your products and other products. So really document how your user can move through your wireframes, understand, and usually there you will understand what there are certain opportunities that you can really benefit from. I really like to use these to demo to clients. It's a good way to get really quick feedback instead of like going all the way and spending a lot of time the beautiful design or beautiful complex prototype. I mean, you got to remind them that it isn't the final design, because you may have a client that is just like, this has no color and this has no like typographic elements. Like, what is this that doesn't look good is not necessarily meant to look good. So you need to explain that to them, just so they can give you some quick feedback on certain things like interactions and flows and just placement and layout and hierarchy. Another thing about getting quick feedback is that making changes to high fidelity design is like really time intensive, and you don't want to make bigger changes when you're nearly done the product. You want to be making those changes as you go along, and the earlier the better. So that's how we can use wireframes. We can definitely use them to like test. So I think like that is the biggest thing, is testing early and testing often and not worry about the details. You know, if you have a client, you can polish them up to showcase some of your interactions or more prominent areas with your flows and, you know, pages that you're designing for. You can definitely add a little bit more fidelity to just showcase or demo them, but you want to keep your colors to grayscale. White or black is perfectly fine. Don't go crazy on fonts. Maybe to what you can even get away with. You can easily show hierarchy with bolding fonts as well as or increase the size. Avoid any flashy images. You can use rectangles and squares and X through the middle. Just say that will be an image. For videos, you can add a triangle in the middle to indicate. So keep it simple. Don't worry about fidelity. The next thing is you've got to ask yourself some pretty important thing. You know, what are the users and the businesses' goal when interacting with this page? How can the content be organized to support these goals? What should the users see when they first come to the page? What will the user expect to see on certain areas of the page? I think these questions are a perfect segue really into wireframing. I have a story map, and definitely go back to the story map if you have one. Do you really consult like user stories and requirements so you can understand what will be on every page? We even did user flows as well, and we're going to left that. So consult your user flows and your sitemaps. You know, as I consult my sitemaps, I'm always looking at the key requirements. I want to know what's the most and least important thing that should be there. You know, different user stories are really great because they're better indicators of what exactly needs to be built from the user's perspective, and a proper like if you have a story map. Before I mentioned that, I would have user stories for every single instance throughout the product journey. We will come together to discuss which is like the riskiest part of the product we want to tackle first. So like for our clients, we probably want to tackle search or the homepage, or maybe the initial registration. All those different points where it really depends on user actually finding products and or registering. So that way the product can actually, there are high traffic areas and the interaction to the user's goal, and we need to get them right. I always tackle the riskiest features first. So like I mentioned before, that's perfect into this because everyone has a different aspect and what risk is, and could be feature that dictate the success of the product. It could be certain assumptions that you learn and the client has for a certain feature. When I am kickoff meeting and I'm talking to the client, I really kind of have a list of risky assumptions that we have. And I mark all these things down. Anything from what we assume the user wants or assume will be a good feature or certain things. Like risk. There are high traffic areas that really depend on nailing the interaction in order to success for the business, for our client. If we release a search that just doesn't work or the interaction is way too complex, the product essentially will fail. So there is a lot of things like that that we need to account for, and we should probably be focusing a lot of our attention on that, like in comparison to other features like profile or a wish list. So these are the tips I often give other designers for when we want to actually use a wireframe